Today we will be looking at the 10 most toxic cards in Hearthstone. Grab your hazmat suit and get ready. At number 10 we have Snowfall Guardian. There have been many cards that punish you playing for board, but none did it like Snowfall Guardian. Not only did it lock your board for a turn, it also grew in size based on how big the board was, punishing you even harder for playing for board. And it didn't just do it once or twice, it did it over and over and over and over and over, making it a very frustrating experience to face because you just couldn't play minions or you would get punished. If you were playing a minion focused deck, you often had to just skip turn because playing minions just would make the situation worse because it would lock you on the board and not allow you to play anything else in the future. Now this was such a frustrating card that it had to be nerfed twice. First it went from the 5 mana to 6 mana, and after that it got nerfed so that it didn't grow anymore based on the minions it throws, but it just started as a 5/5. Just a very frustrating card, and that's why it deserves the spot at number 10. At number 9, we have Theotar, the Mad Duke. Originally a 4 mana card, it was intended to be a counter to combo decks, letting you take away a vital combo piece. However, it didn't matter with quest lines from United and Starwind, hero cards from Alterrock Valley, and most importantly Sire Denetrius, it was good in pretty much any matchup. With Denetrius seeing play in most decks, games often came down to who had him first, with the main counter to him being Theotar. And the counter to getting your Denetrius stolen was, you guessed it, stealing it right back with your own Theotar. And games coming down to who stole a keycard from the opponent just wasn't very fun, and at 4 mana it was just way too easy to put in any deck. That is why they eventually nerfed it to 5 mana and then later again to 6 mana. At which point it really was just a tech card, but nonetheless still frustrating to face. Crazy enough, this card was 3 mana at some point in testing. Imagine if that got released. Then at number 8 we have 2 cards that are toxic in their own right, but when combined give you some of the worst gameplay experiences you can have in Hearthstone. The combo is usually played in Druid due to their ability to play both of these cards in the same turn with a Nubricon. And when you had this combo, you could even decide in which order to play them based on the matchup. Against a class like Paladin, that had no way of clearing immune minions, you played Jailer into Tony, resulting in the opponent having no cards left and you taking their deck on top of having a huge immune board. If you were up against a class like Warrior with a card like Brawl, you generally went Tony first and then played the Jailer, resulting in them having your deck while you destroyed theirs. The Warrior then had to choose between either leaving up that huge board and having an often useless Druid deck, or clearing the board, which then gave them back their empty deck. As you can imagine, neither options were fun to face, especially when it could happen often as early as turn 6. Blizzard tried nerfing the combo twice by hitting a Nubricon, but both Tony and Jailer continued to be design problems, forcing them to eventually completely rework the cards into the versions that we have today. As number 7 on the list, we have Objection. Just like the Jailer, it got released in the Maw and Disorder mini-set, and it was instantly a classic, but not in a good way. Were you playing a big mini deck? Well, hope you weren't expecting to play at all. You had no cheap minions in hand? Well, expect to skip a turn. The card was mostly played in Secret Mage in combination with Counterspell, making you often have to gamble on which secret to play around, and of course, you never guessed it correctly. But even more annoying was when it got randomly generated, especially in Rogue with Shadow Jeweler Hanar. Some games, almost every card you played got countered, resulting in another turn full of secrets to play around again. Although Hanar was frustrating years earlier with Oh My Yogg, at least you could play minions and not constantly get countered. Objection changed all that, and combined with Counterspell could almost punish you for any play that you wanted to make, and that is why it deserves the spot at number 7. Then, as number 6, we have another secret with Iceblock. While we had a few similar cards to this, such as Timeout for Paladin and Cloak of Shadows for Rogue, none of them were as toxic as Iceblock. Starting from day 1 of Hearthstone, it has been a staple in pretty much any slower or combo deck for Mage. Letting you cheat death for 2 turns is incredibly powerful, allowing you to do whatever you want without the fear of dying. While initially there wasn't even any counter to it outside of Flare, which was just contained to Hunter, we did eventually get multiple different answers over the years, such as Eater of Secrets. Most of the time though, these were not worth running, resulting in games against Mage taking forever to end, even if it was already over. or the mates could stall long enough to win while there was little you could do about it. Iceblock did get Hall of Fame pretty early, but eventually it got even worse in Wild with cards like Commander Zavara and Rewind letting you play Iceblock for many more turns. Having the mage stay alive turn after turn with little effort for over 10 years made this card rank at number 6. At number 5, we have a card that punishes you just for playing a slower deck in Glide. It was released with Scholomance Academy, but didn't really see much play until United Installment released the Demon Hunter questline. So why is this card so toxic? Well, for 2 reasons. First of all, it punishes you for just holding cards similar to Divine Favor. Playing any slower deck? Well, don't expect to play any of the cards you're holding, forcing you to just dump your hand as fast as possible. The second reason why this card is so horrible is that you just couldn't plan your turns at all. Wanted to save a card for the next turn or hold onto the coin for a bigger play? Yeah, you couldn't. You just could not plan your next turns against Glide since you never knew what cards you were gonna hold next turn. While sometimes it might have been nice to get 4 new cards, it was overall just incredibly unfun to face since you couldn't plan ahead or set anything up. On top of that, it gave the Demon Hunter either easy refill or enabled their combos. While Glide is one of the few cards on the list that never got changed, it deserves the spot in the top 5 for the awful gameplay it provided. Ranked at number 4, we have a card very closely tied to Iceblock in Open the Waygate. This mage quest from Ongoro lets you take an additional turn, and although it never made much of an impact in Standard, it was a force in Wild for a long time. While initial decks only played the quest award once in a game, future builds were made so that it would be repeated over and over with cards like Grey Sage Parrot or Grand Magister Romath. While some of the cards on this list prevented you from playing some cards, Time Warp didn't even give you the chance to play any cards. Very few things are worse than seeing the opponent take turn after turn, while the only interaction you can have is with the concede button. Open the Waygate caused a few cards to be nerfed, including itself. First, they increased the quest requirement from 5 to 8 random spells, and later they made Parrot not work anymore with the reward, but that didn't stop Quest Mage at all. Eventually, Blizzard had to make Time Warp a once per game effect, effectively killing off the archetype. While other quests like the Caverns Below and the Demon Seed are pretty toxic, not even getting to play against Open the Waygate is even worse and puts it at number 4. The first card in the top 3 is Due Process, and it is the third card on this list from Maw in Disorder. Due Process was a 2 mana card that made both players draw an extra card every single turn. While this might not seem too egregious by itself, it usually just wasn't one Due Process, but often 3 or more that got played in a game. And while the Druid could build the deck around drawing 4+ cards a turn, other decks obviously didn't. This meant that if you weren't an aggro deck, you quickly started burning cards, and there was nothing you could do to stop it. There literally was no counter to it once it got played. This was another case where you would just dump cards as fast as possible, since you just could not run out of cards. Well, at least until you decked it, which would happen pretty fast. Often you were just hoping you wouldn't burn key cards, but usually it was already over once the Druid ramped and played Due Process. It took more than a year before the card finally got nerfed to 4 mana. Because Due Process made you play the game in a way you didn't want to, and there was no way to stop it, it ended up at the number 3 spot. At number 2 we have a card that you might have expected at number 1 with Mindrender Illucia. Originally a 2 mana card, it immediately made waves when it launched with Scholomance Academy. Illucia let you swap hands and deck with the opponent for a turn, allowing you to play their cards for a turn, and your opponent could play yours for a turn. And getting cards taken away isn't very fun. While it feels like an anti-combo card, at 2 mana it was good against pretty much anything. You could take away the 0 mana cards, their win con, or just play it early while you had a hand full of removal so that an aggro deck had nothing to develop for a turn. It quickly got nerfed to 3 mana, where it really was mostly an anti-combo card, and although still hated, it wasn't too egregious for a while, until United in Stormwind. Aggro Priest got some incredible tools with this expansion, such as Dark Bishop Benedictus and Void Touched Attendant. This deck would also play Illucia, but not as an anti-combo tool. As you would expect with an aggro deck, it had a very low curve, which meant that you would quickly develop, but also quickly run out of cards. With no cards left, you would then play Illucia, giving your opponent your empty hand while you took theirs. This meant Illucia acted as a pseudo Time Warp, and made for an incredibly powerful tool in a deck it wasn't intended for. This caused the card to eventually get reworked to where it would just copy your opponent's hand, taking away both the anti-combo and time warp part. Many players rejoiced as Illucia was finally out of the meta and your cards were safe again. And as the most toxic card in Hearthstone, we have Celestial Alignment. Released with Fortunate Barons, it was a 7 mana card that set both players' mana crystals to 0 and made all cards cost 1. While this was a symmetrical effect, it really wasn't the same for either side. Whereas the Druid would build their deck around the effect with expensive cards and ramp, your entire deck would be ruined by it. You were a combo deck that required many cards to work? Nope, that didn't work anymore. You had a lot of discovers? Don't expect to play any of them, since they would still have their original mana cost. And on top of potentially completely ruining your game plan, the Druid could sometimes play almost their whole deck in a turn through cards like Lady Anaconda, which made all nature cards cost 0 after alignment. On top of that, yeah, that wasn't even all. The Druid could play alignment again after playing their whole deck in a turn, and that would mean that you would be put back to 0 mana again. And you could literally only play a single card the next turn to counter whatever the Druid did. As you can imagine, this was an absolutely horrible experience, where it did not only often lock you from playing your deck, but at the same time it enabled the Druid to have an insane amount of mana cheating. Because of this, the card had to be nerfed twice. First, it got increased to 8 mana, and then later the spell would only affect the Druid, removing the most toxic part of the card. It still continued to enable some insane turns, but at least now you got to play your deck the way it was built. And that is my list for the 10 most toxic cards in Hearthstone. Let me know in the comments if you agree with it or what card you would have put on the list. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, share and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and until next time.